Today I'll show you my seedling greenhouse and the main heating systems I use. Keep in mind that not all of these systems will necessarily be used at the same time. Some might not even be used anymore in the long run. The idea is mainly to show you the different ways you can heat a greenhouse in a context like ours. Just so you know, we don't have electricity, or at least we're not connected to the power grid. We have a small power station that lets us use a little bit of electricity. I'll show you exactly how in detail. And then let's get started. Come on. We'll begin with the first system, which is the most obvious. You might even laugh. Sometimes it's best to state the obvious. It's the sun. Every greenhouse will be heated by the sun. So the idea is to choose the sunniest and most practical location. So in our case, the greenhouse is placed at one end of our work tunnel, right next to the work table where we do our transplanting, our sowing and all that. And so it's right next to it and in the sunniest spot, so it heats up well. Now, for those who might wonder if it will get too hot in there during the summer, no, and for several reasons. The first reason is that in the summer, everything will be open. All around can be open, so it will be ventilated and we won't be suffocating from the heat either. The second point is that in the summer, we'll have trees that will provide a bit of shade. Trees that lose leaves above the greenhouse in winter allow it to warm up, but have leaves in summer for shade. Trees, vines, climbing plants, we'll see, we'll have things that provide shade. And then, the last point, and maybe the most important, is that in the middle of summer, we don't do any sowing. Here, we need it to be warm now in the spring, but if it gets too hot during the summer, in the end, it's not that big of a deal. So first point, that's the foundation, the sun. Second point. Once we've managed to create heat in a greenhouse, the next step is to keep that heat, and so that's going to be about insulation. You should know that all around me, both the ceiling and the walls, everything is covered with double layers. Sorry for those who aren't fans of plastic, but I couldn't find a solution that's as practical and as inexpensive. Maybe we could make greenhouses out of glass, but I can't afford it. Anyway, that's not the point. So here it's plastic, everything is covered with double layers. For those who want to know what kind of tarp this is, it's a colorless thermal 4-season film, 200 microns thick. It's standard agricultural tarp, the kind used on all greenhouses. It may be plastic, but it's still good quality plastic. It will last a long time. It should last for years, as long as it's properly secured and doesn't flap too much in the wind. We've got crazy wind right now, and yet it hasn't moved, so that's the idea. Thanks to this double insulation, it keeps the heat in much better. Another thing, while I'm on the topic of keeping the heat in, is that the greenhouse can stay closed all the time, while still being practical for us to move around, because we work outside the greenhouse. And the seedlings are inside, so we're often there with boxes full of plants. It's not always practical to open and close the door, so we put in swing hinges so it swings both ways. This allows us, when our hands are full, to go in easily and come out easily. All while having a door that more or less automatically will always stay closed. Well, it's not easy, this kind of hinge. It's not really made for this type of door, and adjusting it isn't simple, hence the tensioner, to adjust the tension anyway. And so it really stays closed. But there you go, it's a little practical feature. On top of that, first, before discussing the heating system, let's review our system that retains heat. The third system is buffer tanks, so it's 2 hinges, huge water tanks that are buried in the greenhouse. There are 2 cubic meters that are buried at a depth of 16 inches in the ground. So it's going to heat up. They're on the south side, so they'll heat up with the sun, and the water will store the heat and release it during the night. I don't know exactly how many degrees it can keep, but it will maintain a certain thermal inertia, so it will cool down more slowly. So that's already pretty good. Since they're buried 40 centimeters deep, I think the water also gains heat from the soil. These tanks are usually on pallets, but I removed the pallet here. The tank is really placed directly on the ground, 40 centimeters deep. So maybe that's not deep enough for geothermal energy, but at least at that depth the ground doesn't freeze. And then the water as a result isn't likely to freeze and maybe even gives back a little bit of heat. This system, for those who are more into construction, is kind of like the trombe wall system, you know, those thick stone walls. A material that stores heat can be placed in houses, so the wall absorbs heat from the sun during the day and releases it at night. In the house it's kind of the same idea, but in a greenhouse and with water. There might be a way to improve the system even more by painting the tanks black so they store even more heat. We might do that soon. Now we're going to look at the systems that actually produce heat, starting with a heating mat. So we have a huge heating mat here that's almost 4 meters long. It's totally oversized. It's folded at the end so it can fit in this greenhouse, which is only 3 meters long. It's left over from my old nursery, which was a bit bigger and most importantly had electricity. Here we don't have electricity, so it uses quite a lot of electricity, way too much for what we have. Just so you know, when it comes to electricity, we're not connected to the power grid. However, we do have a small EcoFlow station that still lets us use a little bit of electricity. We use it to recharge our power tool batteries and a few other small things I'll show you in a moment. But for the heating mat, it uses way too much electricity, so it just doesn't make sense. By the way, if you're in the area and you're looking to buy a 4-meter long heating mat, come see us. We're going to try to sell it so we can maybe buy a smaller one and see if that's better. So since the heating mat is too big, we tried another system, so the 6 system, the heating cable, which is much smaller. Here it's a 4-meter cable that only uses 30 watts of electricity and is also in a very small greenhouse. So that's even more insulation, and it's connected to a thermostat. I'll talk to you about thermostats right after, because that can also be important. So this thermostat, it's set to 15 degrees. I think it starts heating at 15 degrees. So in the greenhouse, it will be between 15 and 20 degrees. That's enough for all the seedlings that need a bit of warmth. For the seedlings that need even more heat, we have the same heating cable, except instead of being 4 meters, it's 8 meters. And that one, we have it at home because it uses 50 watts. That's a bit too much for here. We really want to keep it to a minimum. So with this heating cable that we have at home, that's where we put the plants that really need it the most. We're between 20 and 25, or even a bit more than 25, like 27 or 28. So for all the Solanaceae, peppers, chilies, all that, it's perfect. So this little 4-meter 30-watt heating cable doesn't use much power. Plugged into a thermostat, and we tested 2 different thermostats. The first thermostat we tried was really cheap. We paid about 15 euros for it, all electronic. You can choose at what temperature it starts heating and up to what temperature, and at what temperature it stops heating, which is completely unnecessary. And the first big drawback is that this thermostat itself uses electricity. The cord uses 30 watts cord plus thermostat equals 50 watts. So we have a 4-meter heating cord and a thermostat that uses as much power as the cord itself. So it's not worth it. And above all, the second big drawback is this little thermostat that costs 15 euros. It worked, I tinkered with it a bit, it worked for a few dozen minutes maybe, without exaggerating. I was going to say a few minutes and then all of a sudden, nothing. So that's it for low-cost thermostats, be careful. Another thermostat we tested is a bit more professional. It's a mechanical device where you can just set the temperature below which it sends electricity. And that's enough. You set it to 15 degrees. Above 15 degrees, it doesn't send electricity. Below 15 degrees, it sends electricity. And so you plug the heating cord into it, which keeps it between 15 and 20 degrees inside. It's a mechanical device that, depending on the temperature, either sends electricity or doesn't. So there's zero electricity consumption. We only use what the cord itself consumes. The first drawback of this thermostat is the price. If the other one was about 15 euros, I'm not sure you'll find this one for less than 50 euros. Maybe if you find a good deal, go for it. And it's going to cost between 50, 100, sometimes 150. I've seen it at 250 euros. Maybe you don't have to go that far, but anyway, this kind of thermostat is expensive. On the other hand, it's sturdy. The one I have, I've been carrying it around for more than 15 years here and there and still no problems. And that's the only downside. Like for the rest, it's great, it works well, it doesn't use much energy. So if I had to choose, that's what I'd take. Before finishing with the most economical, the most eco-friendly, the best heating system there is. I'm going to show you 2 others which aren't really heating systems but more like safety systems in case of a hard freeze. Number 6 then, the kerosene heater. It's a somewhat modern electronic heater with a built-in thermostat that sets the temperature below which it turns on. It heats just a little bit. There you go, I've set it to 15-16 degrees, which helps maintain a good temperature. It produces carbon monoxide, 2 which plants love. It's great, but that being said, we're not going to use it, or at least not to heat the greenhouse, and I'll explain why. So, first of all, the main reason is that it's a kerosene heater, and it's not the most eco-friendly thing out there. And I still want to try to keep a certain level of ethics. Even though I use plastic and there are already plenty of flaws, I'll try not to add more than that. So kerosene? No way. And another thing is that it's an electronic heater, and the electronic part uses, I think, 300 something watts. I'm not sure if a fan or something else is running in there, but 300 watts, that's like a small heater, so I don't need an oil stove that uses as much as a small electric heater would. So that's why, right? And then another reason is that here we're organic. So organic farmers aren't allowed to heat their greenhouses with oil. We as nurserymen and plant producers would be allowed to heat a small space with oil, but that's the reason. Besides, I don't want to do something that's borderline, so we're really going to keep it, maybe as a backup system in case of a hard frost. But above all, it will be a heating system for us if one day we need to work, to have a bit of warmth, to heat ourselves up a little. But I think we're hardly going to use it at all anymore. And now the 7th heating system. This one you might find funny, but I assure you it really works. This system is funeral candles. We tested it last year in a place a bit smaller than this one. These candles cost between 2 and 3 euros, maybe even a little less. You can buy them in fairly large quantities, so funeral candles which can stay lit for several days, since we only use them at night in case of frost. Here's a candle. It can last a week, 10 days easily. A candle won't produce a lot of heat, but in a closed space, if you put 2 or 3 candles, so as I was saying, last year we tested it in a slightly smaller space, let's say about a third of this volume with 2 candles burning all night, we had between 5 and 7, 8 degrees difference compared to outside. So yeah, it can be pretty effective. Again, this is a system that we'll really use in case of frost, when there's a risk of loss due to freezing. The few degrees that it will help us gain are mainly to keep the greenhouse from freezing, and it helps save our plants. It's not at all a heating system that we'll use every night, but in case of emergency, we always have the candles. More direct, more than anything else, we always have the candles to save our plants. Of course, yes, it's fire, it's dangerous. We're careful about how we use them so they don't set fire to the wood or the plastic, but if we're careful, there isn't too much risk either. And 8th, a heating system that isn't set up yet and that I'm not going to set up this year, we'll use it next winter. It's a heating system that works thanks to compost. So has anyone here already heard about the Jean Pain method? Those who have already made hotbeds with compost know that compost can heat up. A pile of compost in full decomposition. It can reach over 70 degrees at the core, and the idea is to capture this heat from the compost to warm the greenhouse. The Jean Pain system, so for those who don't know Jean Pain, go check it out. He wrote a book, The Jean Pain Method, which is very hard to find. But if you manage to find it, otherwise on the internet, type Jean Pain Method jump in, and you'll find lots of really interesting things. There are ways to use it. He made gas, what we now call methanization, but in his time that didn't exist yet. He discovered all of this himself, so he tested several ways to use it. And the method I want to try here is one that doesn't require any electricity. It's just the heat itself that will make the air circulate. The greenhouse was placed next to a big compost pile, so its location was chosen for that reason. I'm making my compost right next to it, a big pile of compost through which I'm going to run a stovepipe, a pretty big one, well, a stovepipe. You see the size of a stovepipe, and so this pipe will have to come out of my greenhouse from the bottom, go through the compost, and then go back into the greenhouse from the top. Since the pipe will heat up, it's going to heat the air inside, so the hot air will rise and enter the greenhouse, which will draw cold air in through the bottom of the pipe. And so there you go, it's going to create a circuit thanks to the heat, which will run on its own. If I remember correctly, in Jean Pain's book, he explained that in his tests, it really produced a lot of heat, so I'll see. For a volume like this, what can it do? What size compost pile? What type of compost will I need to make? There are plenty of things I'm going to test next year, so that's it, to be continued. I hope all this has given you some ideas for heating a greenhouse. If you have other ways to heat, feel free to talk about them in the comments. It could be really interesting. Maybe I'll make an even more complete video about it next time. The seedling greenhouse is ready with some seedlings started and the starter going too. All that's left is for me to start growing plants. In upcoming videos, we'll discuss greenhouses. Alright, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching until now. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That's it. If you'd like to support me, you can use the Typee platform. There's a link nearby. And thanks to everyone who will do it. See you next time. Bye.